Welcome back to another I Made Your Spartans video, the short series that has gone on way longer than I ever would have expected it to, where I of course make different Spartan builds based on your own suggestions, whether they be based on a character from a movie, a game, or a completely original idea, which of course allows me to mess around with infinite customization just a bit more than I already do, and make use of the hundreds of cosmetics that I already own. Now before we begin, I did take the suggestions for this video over on my Twitter account, which as you can imagine is just Magpie Leon. So if you do want to suggest some build ideas for a future one of these videos, if I ever end up making any more, make sure to go give me a follow over there. There has of course been other times where I've taken suggestions from other platforms like YouTube and Discord, and the only reason I don't do that as frequently is it makes it so much easier to keep it all in one place, and it just makes it a lot easier to sort of keep track of. Anyways, without wasting any more of time, let's jump straight in. Our first suggestion comes from Grimlock Smash, and it was to create Aega Knight from Fortnite. Now this guy looks pretty cool. I do actually own this skin in the game, and it is a personal favorite of mine, so this one was one that I absolutely had to try out. The main thing I felt like I was going to struggle with was the helmet and the shoulder pads. There'd already been a coating that released quite recently, being one of the Twitch drops at the Halo World Championship, that I thought would work perfectly for this. And at a similar time, there was also a new Halo World Championship bundle that had a helmet with a somewhat similar shape. Fortunately, a friend of mine had recently gifted me some credit, so I ended up picking that bundle up, and here is the build that I created. I do feel like this might work a bit better with something like the Mythic Magister shoulder pads, but as a whole, I think the coloration and overall silhouette of the armor is pretty similar. The undersuit of this coating is of course a similar shade to the cloth that Aega Knight has, and it does obviously have the glowing orange accents, with the glowing orange visor too. Next up, Minty John suggested that I make Red Hood from Arkham Knight. Again, this is another one that I was a little unsure of at first. However, then I remembered I have the Nexus helmet, which of course throws a complete dome over your head. This paired up with the Riz visor, the Sundown smile coating, and a few other random pieces, and boom, Red Hood is born. This is by no means my finest work, but I think all things considered it turned out pretty okay. Armstrong Gaming then suggested that I make Waluigi, and I gave it my best shot, but honestly I'm not all too proud of this one. I used the Monarch coating because of course it's a purple coating that does have some gold accents. I also chose to use prosthetic hands to try and get the coloration a little more accurate to his gloves, and the aviator helmet simply because it looked more like he was wearing a hat, with the spirit visor to give that impression of the big white eyes. But as a whole, this one just isn't too great in my opinion. But hey, a couple people in the comments seem to think that I did a decent job, so there's that I suppose. The next suggestion come from BDO, and it was to make Reinhardt from Overwatch. Now, I'm no big Overwatch fan by any means, but I do play it from time to time with my girlfriend and friends, and Reinhardt is arguably one of the better characters, and I do actually really like how his armor looked, so again, this is one that I actually really wanted to try out. And here was my attempt. I used the Eagle Strike Core, considering it is like the biggest, bulkiest armor in Infinite, and I had to try and match that up with some armor pieces that had a similar shape to Ryan's. The chest piece I used was to try and represent the big circle in the middle of Ryan's chest, and I used the security shoulder pads because I just think they were the closest in terms of shape. The Taskmaster helmet with its horn attachment to try and resemble the horns on Ryan's helmet, and there is other helmets that have horns, but I think this is the closest in terms of its overall shape. And then of course I got some nice screenshots of him holding a gravity hammer. I do actually kind of wish the hard light shield was in Infinite because I feel like I could have got a really cool screenshot with that, but oh well. Kaltuski suggested that I make the guy from the Infinite Warfare cover. I used the new Eclipse helmet alongside the Trailblazer attachment, aka the Airwolf attachment, as I believe overall this combination gave the closest overall shape to the Advanced Warfare guy, to the Infinite Warfare guy. Also, Rikshasa just seemed like the core that made the most sense here. I actually took the shoulder pads off to give it that more human appearance, and using the Redacted Records coating and the Beltol visor, I think really topped this one off. It may not necessarily be the most accurate to the character that it's supposed to represent, but overall I just think it's a nice looking build. Taking a slight detour, this next build is one that I built on this Wednesday's stream, and it is actually a character that I had attempted, I believe, in a prior one of these videos, being Boba Fett. The Boba Fett-esque coating is now completely cross-core, so I actually ended up using it on Rikshasa and changing the entire approach that I took to making this Spartan. I do think Extend It with its attachment still gives a pretty similar shape to Boba Fett's helmet, but unfortunately it just did not look good on Rikshasa. So again, although this is one that isn't necessarily necessarily super accurate. I do actually like how it turned out. And while we're also on this topic of Spartan builds that I've attempted before, I just wanted to reshare the Dead Space Spartan that I'd made a while back, because I once again had a couple of people suggesting this one, despite it being one of the first ones I did in the first one of these videos. I prefer how this looks with the security helmet with its attachment, but here is the B-less version, because I know a couple of people are going to tell me that that is more accurate to his helmet, and of course it does bear a lot of similarities, so I understand why people say it. Here's both versions. But anyways, let's move on. Our next suggestion came from Digion, and it was probably one of my favorite ones to build in this entire video. They asked me, in my opinion, how would the yellow team mentioned in Isidor's description look? So with that, I set out a couple of goals. 1, I could only use the Isidore helmet. 2, it had to be Mark IV armor. And 3, with them being yellow team, their coatings had to be yellow. However, I of course wanted all 3 of these Spartans that I made to have distinguishable silhouettes. I want you to be able to look at them and sort of get an impression of what their role is in the team, and to just make each Spartan look a bit more unique. So here is yellow team. Of course, the one in the center is more of the leader. And then we've got the heavy guy and the tech whiz nerd or whatever. I actually like how all 3 of these builds turned out. I don't know if this would look anything like how yellow team would in canon. To my knowledge, I think they've only ever been mentioned in this helmet's description, though someone did tell me they were also in Halo Legends, so I probably will have to double check that one. Either way, I loved how all 3 of these builds turned out. And of course, I'll be showing all 3 builds individually on screen if you want to steal these looks. My favorite of the 3 is probably the heavy guy, who also is making use of the Wilhelm attachment, which I think pairs up with this helmet perfectly. Anyway, moving on to our next build, Wyvern suggested that I make a Spartan from Tron Legacy. I've never seen Tron Legacy, nor have I ever actually watched any Tron movie, but straight away I knew Chimera would probably be the best core for this. Overall, this build is pretty damn basic, and most of the cosmetics here are actually stuff that's free because there's no additional shoulder pads. The chest attachment was free in Cyber Showdown 3. The helmet was in a battle pass, and the knee pads were from a store bundle, but honestly, you could change those out for anything, and I don't really think it'd matter too much. But although it is a basic one, I think it is quite an effective one. The next Spartan build was a suggestion from Emilio Martinez. They asked if I could make a Spartan that is equipped to manage heavy equipment or machinery, not exactly in the front line, but maybe more focused on reconstruction or salvage at destroyed civilian environments. For some reason, the first core that I was drawn to here was Hazmat, and I knew I wanted to get a screenshot of this guy next to a forklift straight away. So overall, I'm pretty happy with how the Mr. John forklift build turned out. And again, this was another one that was pretty fun to work on. Terracon117 then suggested that I make Galvatron. So after disrupting his plasma bath, here's what we have. The main reason I even attempted this was because I knew there was a purple and white armor coating, which I thought would work pretty well. And also I threw on an orange coating for the spanker to represent his arm cannon. I used this helmet mostly for the 3 horns on its head. I know technically it has 5, but I just think overall it retained the closest shape to Galvatron's head. And although there is a couple others that I wanted to use that I think could have worked, even something like Kabuto, I think the way the coating is applied to this helmet just makes it look a bit more accurate. Our final Spartan suggestion come from Soul Saber 123, and it was to make a robotic Spartan. It was essential to make it look like a robot and not a person in Spartan armor. For this, I went back to the Mark IV core, as I knew its prosthetics looked the most bulky and the most robotic. I also used the Mark V Zeta helmet with its attachment, since with it completely covering up the visor, I thought that would just give it much less of a human appearance. I tried as hard as I could to strip this one of any humanity, and in the end I think it turned out okay. I don't think this is any means the best Spartan build I have ever made, but I'd like to think I achieved the goal. And with that, that is every Spartan build that I made from this group of suggestions. Of course, there was many more, but I definitely couldn't get around to making all of them, unfortunately. There's a lot of things that get suggested that I've either done before, or I don't really have the right armor pieces to make that thing look good. Or in some cases, I'm simply just not interested enough in a specific concept to make that into a Spartan. But regardless, this likely will be a video idea that I do revisit in future, because you guys seem to really enjoy it, and I do enjoy messing around with Infinite's customization. So of course, as I mentioned earlier on, if you want to potentially provide some Spartan build ideas, make sure to go and follow me over on Twitter. Anyways, I'm going to wrap that one up there. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you all in the next one.